Hey woodworkers, I wanted to talk to you about building mock-ups. In this case, it's going to be for the chair. Sorry, this board's in the way. All right, so you can kind of catch along this leg here. There are some heads of fasteners. You can kind of see some pocket holes over there. So there's really not a whole lot to it. Pardon me. There's also a proud screw head over there. You'll notice a theme for what it is we're doing, and I was hoping that that would be helpful for talking about how to do joinery here for our mock-ups. So just want to walk through some of the things that I use for the process, and then hopefully that would be helpful. First and foremost, drill bits. These are going to be something you will have, obviously. Well, hopefully, obviously. And the drill bits are necessary because I use a lot of dowels in designing and building my mock-ups. The name of the game for all of this is reversibility. So I can get a great deal more strength with a dowel than I can with just putting a bunch of fasteners in. So that's what I'm doing with these things, having a bunch of them. You don't have to buy dowels, you can make your own. This one I ran through a dowel plate, so you can make these to whatever diameter they are. And I guess that was a good idea at the time. Given how much time that took, maybe it's a better use to just go and buy something that's ready-made. All right, so drill bits for that. In addition to that, or in conjunction with it, I should say, I've got a dowel centering jig here. So what this thing will do is these jaws will open and close concentrically so that wherever your dowel is going to be located, this will drill a hole perpendicular to whatever the edge is, as well as dead center of that material. Sometimes that's good. For the most part, that's perfect for what we're doing. So one of these, and from the top here, there are different diameters. This is a 1/2 inch hole for a 1/2 inch dowel, obviously, in different sizes. So these things are pretty great, worth the investment. What else is there? Okay. With that, the last piece of that is going to be something called a dowel center. And so there are these little guys which make your life so much easier translating the location of one of these dowel holes to the next piece. So those are kind of one system in doing this. All of that gives incredible amount of temporary strength, which is what we're talking about, but it doesn't really have that clamping hold that I would hope to have for making mock-ups. For doing that, we're going to need some fasteners. And so fasteners. What I'm looking for here are construction screws. You can get these at box stores. Something that has a self-tapping end here, so I don't have to pre-drill the whole way down. These ones are steel. Brass screws or wood screws do not buy, but a box of these things is, I don't know, $10 more or less, and these things are worth their weight in gold for what it is we're doing. These ones have a flat head, which is great. Some of these are constructed slightly more interesting. These are by a company called Spax, which makes this much more expensive now, the conversation. 3.5 inch in length. It has a self-tapping section here. There are also kind of coarse threads that will also help to drive this thing in without pre-drilling. And these screws are amazing. They talk about going into every metal, every material, wood, metal, so on and so forth. They also have this little cutting section on the underside of the head, which will allow you to countersink these a little bit more. None of that really matters for what we're doing, but these are a breeze to use when we're getting into just driving these things home. All right, so a good assortment of these screws is going to be important. 3 inch long, I think, are great for larger areas that you need to get a lot more grab into. So that's what these are. Drill bits. That's the last piece of mock-up making for me is to use something called a pocket hole jig. I like pocket holes a lot for this, and admittedly this is a bit excessive, but with a pocket hole, instead of driving into the end grain, and wood is notoriously horrible for holding in the end grain capacity, these pocket holes now go at an angle or become somewhat toenailed into here, and with the head of these things, it really holds with an incredible amount of force. So I like this system for those we're doing. I mentioned this is overkill. This particular setup here, this little attachment, this is great for using on cabinet parts. What I'm going to be using primarily is similar concept here. We have locations for drilling 2 of these holes. Hopefully you can pick up this is at an angle. And then to clamp or hold that, it has this little gizmo, so I can adjust whatever the length or the thickness of this is on the interior. So gripping that in there, pre-drilling, and then getting rid of this, putting in one of these screws. I cannot really use a flathead screw with a tapered head on the underside. It's got to be a flat section here. That's what's going to start to really create that hold. If I were to use a taper, it starts to create this wedge, and it's just going to pull deeper and deeper and deeper into that wood, and it's going to fail the joint. And what you don't want to have happen is when you're putting joinery together for these things, you don't want to have, especially a chair, any of those things fail. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. The last thing you're going to need is 2x material. And I've started a little setup over here. Hopefully this will help. Yeah, you can catch that. Okay, so depending on how pieces you're cutting, 2x4s kind of make sense. And if you check the sweep of this leg, I was able to understand from the drawing what this needs to be. But in practicality, I was able to get that curve out of a 2x6 board. So I don't have to glue different pieces together to get that curve. I could. Definitely strong enough for your mock-up, but this will simulate either some type of a bent lamination, or if I want to go out of a solid piece of wood to make that for the actual piece, I can do that as well. Anyway, so 2x material depends on your design. 2x4s primarily will do us just fine. However, we might need some thicker stock. All right, so off camera, I already drilled in these 2 holes to accept the dowel material as we talked about. All right, so that's ready to go. What I want to show is kind of the critical parts here, and the thing that's not quite as intuitive is to translate that to the next board. The thing with dowels, which is kind of difficult or frustrating or annoying, is that if I do one dowel, it's a breeze to locate this in place. If I'm going to use 2 dowels, as I have here, then that's when things get a little bit fussier. Not terribly fussy, but still fussier. All right, I'm going to do those. Okay, so one on the edge, one on the face. That's going to be important for the next step. So let's say I just want to make one of these holes. So from the top straight down, I can view where the center of this hole needs to be, and that's okay. When you get into a smaller diameter hole, you can kind of lose track of where the location is. For a 1/2 inch, I'm okay doing this process. The other thing that I want to do, which is much more accurate, is, and this is why this line on the face comes into play, you'll see that, hopefully you can see that. All right, on this set, so 1/2 inch hole goes here. These are all labeled. This line right here, you can see a series of white lines. Those lines get coordinated with the lines that we just established, and that ensures that we're able to pull this thing in. As I said, this is going to be dead center because of the system that this thing is designed by. And this is always going to drill perpendicular to this edge. So what's important about that is I use the same jig on the end of this board, but let's say this was not 90 degrees. Let's say I had an angle cut here. This is always going to drill perpendicular to that, and that's okay. As long as you are aware that when you make the cut first and then drill the holes, when you drill the second one, it's going to align. So that makes our life a little easier. Okay, so that's that. I've got this set up. Oops, I'm in the wrong spot. That's the right spot. I keep saying I do so much better when I'm just working and not talking and working. Some people are good at it, and then, you know, there's me. You'll notice I'm clearing these chips. I have to. If I continue to just drive this all the way home, there's nowhere for those chips to escape. So make sure you do that as you're going. All right, that's that. I wasn't careful about the length, the depth of this, because I don't really care. What I am interested, however, is just making sure that this is long enough to seat on both ends. All right, so I've got this thing, and having nothing to do with luck, we got this one nailed in, or dialed in. All right, so the question now is, as I said, one dowel is a breeze, the second dowel is where all the marbles, or it's for all the marbles, or whatever the expression is. How do I locate this one to that one accurately? So can you use this dowel center piece here? If you've never used these are worth knowing about. So it's got this little nipple piece on the end, and then these come in different diameters, which you're looking at now, to establish the center location of the first hole. All right, so I'm going to put this one in there. Should be a decent fit. Harder woods grab these things a little bit better. All right, so now making sure that this is aligned, because if I tweak this laterally, that center point is always going to grab or make a mark wherever you tell it to. I've left the one dowel in here, which is a good reference if I didn't want to have that dowel in place and I wanted to translate these two holes to the second board. I would just use two of those dowel centers, press it in there, and then I have my location. Okay. So that's done. You do this really geeky thing. You might not care, but I'll show you anyway. So yeah, you can tell that my line was just a little bit off. So the center point there is the critical piece. And then that one is going to be that one. But that's what I want to know or locate. All right. I got lucky. Sometimes you're not able to take those out because they hold so well. So at this point, the lines are irrelevant. What I'm going to do now, and getting geeky again, with this drill bit, it has this center point here. Not quite a brad point, but it's the centerpiece. So what I'm going to do before I clamp, just want to make sure I'm still in frame. Yes, I am. Okay. Nope, that's not good enough. This is going to make your experience that much better. Yeah, there we go. All right, so what I want to do is leave this somewhat loose, and then all I'm looking for is the lateral location until this bit finds that center point there, and that feels about right. That looks pretty good. Here we go. All right. Do not be tempted. This is not actual legit furniture joinery. This is mock-up joinery at best. All right, so oops, I need this out. So with that, I have this material. I'm going to keep or cut these the same length. You can take this piece to the bandsaw, miter saw. You can do a couple of different ways. I just like a handsaw so much for cutting this thing down. This is now theater of the mind. Use your imagination about how cool this cut is making it. All right, so I've got that. That goes there. Man, I really hope this works. Oops, it won't if I do it backwards. Also, the important part of making your marks just on one face. All right, so at this point, I'm trying to squeeze this and pull it in different ways. I'm happy with the alignment. I don't need to be terribly critical or fussy about this joint. I will bottom this thing out, but I want to show you the next steps. Keeping in mind what it is we're doing and what we're asking this material to do for us, we just need to understand what this is going to feel like, and secondarily, what the appearance of this is going to be. I've done too good of a job. They say right tool for the job. All right, so I'm not really terribly overwhelmed with what about this is going to be pretty. I'm just trying to get a sense of what this is going to feel like when it's complete. You should probably never let me borrow your tools. I probably have 5 hammers within easily reaching distance, but you know, there's no sports in that. I'm not sure why this is not bottoming out. It should be the same. All right. What I want to show you next is how I can get the clamping pressure in this. Remember we talked about this one is, I'm sorry, the dowels are good for good joinery and any flexion that's going to happen. So if I have this back here, I've got dowels in the back, but I need something to really hold it, and that's where the clamping comes in. So with my pocket hole jig, clamping this gizmo down. This material is so thick that I don't really have to worry about overlapping where the dowel is and where this pocket hole jig will be. I just want to distribute a little bit of this pressure. All right, that looks pretty good. So I've aligned, make sure you can see, yeah, okay. So I've aligned the end here, clamping with enough pressure that way. This will allow me to drill 2 of these holes should I choose. I could probably get away with 1. If I do 1 in this face, 1 in this face, that's great. And this is the only thing that I need to really set up for this jig. I won't need to do any setup over there, which is kind of the beauty of this. All right, so that goes there. Part of the pocket hole system is that they've got their own drill bits. And what you might be able to see, there we are, if I bring it into camera, there we go. So there's a little step right here. And so this is going to drill a smaller diameter that will capture the shank of the screw. This is where that head of the screw is going to land. And that's why it's important to not use a flathead screw, because that taper gives you trouble. And that is that. All right, so driving this thing home. Oh, so much better. All right, good. So now I need to put some fasteners into this. Oops. So these fasteners are all square drive. So instead of a flathead, I'm sorry, a slotted screw head or Phillips or anything like that, it has 4 edges to it, and that gives a lot more grip. So kind of finding that recessed area for this screw to go into, and then I want to choke down the clutch on this thing quite a bit. It's easy to overdrive this and then strip out the threads like that, but I want to engage or lock this in such a way that I'm going to hear that clicking of that clutch. Next time I'll get it. All right, So now that I've done that, this is pretty solid for the purposes of what we want to do. If I needed to, I can put screws on the back here, as I said. There is another option for driving fasteners, which I'm going to talk about. This thing is arguably worth its weight in gold. Hitachi is calling a modular drill and driver, which is a really fancy way for saying it's got a combination situation on it. So right now, just have this sleeve. This sleeve will accept these two different apparatus. So I've got a pilot hole bit, and it also has a countersink piece to it. All right, so pilot hole, countersink. This thing will drill in, drill, right? And then instead of having to reach for another drill, this rotates around, and then we've got whatever bit you need. This one is a Phillips head, obviously, but you could swap that out with whatever driver you need. So you'll find those to be pretty invaluable for purposes of what it is we're doing. All right, so I've got good structure in here. I've got the dowels in, obviously. Let's say I want to toenail something in here, just do a little bit more thread. All right, so drilling that thing in without changing out the driver, but I do need to reload for screws. So I only really drilled a shallow depth. Oh, this is the wrong head. That's why I hate you. Known as a torque head. I'm finding a lot more of these construction bits have torque heads. Oops, so do you. Well, Spax it is. These Spax heads are kind of cool and also frustrating. So you can see that there's this combination head here. So it's large enough in the center to accept a square driver. And then also with this cross pattern, it will take a Phillips head as well. Oh yeah, I need to tighten you up. Right. So toenail, I could toenail here as well to alleviate any torque this way, but with this has gotten a lot stronger. The benefit of all of these things, and there is a benefit, especially in building your mock-up. So if you start making this and realize, oh man, this seat is too whatever, it's too low, too high, too wide, too narrow, all of this stuff can be reversible, which is kind of where I was starting with all of this. If I were to glue in any of this, I'm committed. And at that point, this becomes more of a permanent piece and less of what we're after, which is trying to gather information about where we need to go next. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. That was a lot thrown at you, but each one of these things has their merits, and I challenge you, I dare you to buy a combination of this thing. I don't know what these are called in the market, but again, modular drill and driver combination, and a bunch of people make those. So between that, between the centering dowel jig and the Craig jig or the pocket hole screw, you're going to be unstoppable with all of this stuff. The only problem you'll need now is probably going to need 2 drills. Hopefully not 3, but 2 drills are better than 1 for sure. All right, good luck everyone. Happy model or mock-up making.